Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Nuland, what you said there are going to be new sanctions out today. Who are those going to be against? Who are the targets of those sanctions?
Ranking Member Risch, there are more than 40 sanctions coming out. They may actually have been published at about 10:30. The vast majority of them are against Prigozhin and the Wagner Group in Africa. There are also sanctions against Putin's cronies, against those who provide material support to Russia's military-industrial complex. And then there is one in particular that addresses the chairman's question with regard to China.
Yeah, the chairman and I have both been anxious to see what's happening with China, because China seems to be acting with impunity, and that we really need to ratchet up our sanctions in that regard. They may be big, but they're not too big to fail in that regard, and we really need to ratchet the sanctions up there. Also, Secretary Nuland, first of all, I think most of us here were glad to see that finally the administration yesterday agreed to provide Abrams tanks, and we've been calling for this for some time, but we've been repeatedly told over the months that sending tanks to Ukraine was not possible or desirable or would somehow be escalatory, and all of a sudden it changed yesterday. How did that? This is embarrassing. How did that change? What happened?
Well, I'm going to let Assistant Secretary Wallner talk about the internal discussion inside the Pentagon. What I will say to you, Ranking Member, is that Abrams, as you know, are very sophisticated tanks, and they require significant training. So even as we approved them yesterday, it's going to take some time to get them to the battlefield. So this is not something that's going to appear in time for the spring offensive. Which
underscores what I said. You know, we've been asking for this for 6 months. Had you started 6 months ago, they'd be all ready for the spring offensive. So what happened here? Who's to blame for this?
You know, I think at every stage of this, we have looked at what the Ukrainians have needed, what they've been requesting. There was a period in the fall where they were capturing a huge number of Russian tanks on the battlefield, which they were able to use successfully in the Kherson and Kharkiv offensive, but now they need more, and so we are responding.
Well, it didn't answer the question, but I guess we're not going to get an answer to that question. But I got to tell you, it's all through this thing we've been pressing the administration to do things, and usually they do the right thing, but it takes forever to get there. And as a result of that, there's a great loss on the battlefield and lives lost in the meantime. So I want to underscore that the administration truly needs to act more rapidly. That brings us, Secretary Walter, to the Stryker combat vehicles. As we all know, there's different versions of the Stryker vehicles, and one of the things that the Ukrainians been asking for is the Strykers that are equipped with the cannons that are comparable to those found on tanks. But the administration's declining to give them those. They're giving them something with only machine guns and no heavy weapons, and they're really not much more than an armored taxicab. What's going on there? Can we expect a reversal of that, hopefully, in the near future?
Senator, I do not have information on the specific variant of Stryker vehicles, APCs, as you refer to. What I will say is that
you do know that they're not going to. They've decided, or at least they're telling us, they're not going to give them the ones with the cannons that are found on the tanks.
I would need to validate that, Senator. But I will speak to the value of the Stryker capability and the volume of the Stryker capability.
We know the value of the Stryker capability, and we know how much it's enhanced if it's got a cannon on it instead of machine guns. So I'm not really interested in that part of the answer, but. Again, I would urge you, and I suppose the way things go, eventually they'll do it, but they need to do it, and they really need to do it rapidly. Well, my time's almost up. At some point in time, we need to have a really good discussion of what's going to happen when this is over. It will be over at some point in time. Either the Russians will quit fighting, the Ukrainians will quit fighting. Neither one of them are near that point at this point. But what's going to happen in the future? Look, we're not going to go back to doing business with Russia as we have before, and so as a result of that, we need to talk about how we're going to interact with Russia. The Europeans are already doing that. When they come to see me, they've already got blueprints as far as how they're going to change directions. So I'd like to hear how we're going to change directions. With that, my time's up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.